Hey, Neethi, it's Brian. It looks like my day is a little bit more packed tomorrow than normal, so I wanted to respond by video to your text. What I would do is focus your one pager on outcomes, measures, and support for that $5 million fund. So you want to set clear goals or outcomes with the team. What is the thesis of the fund that matches the organization that you're serving? So, for example, if we were together at Matchbook and we wanted to serve the bottom 5% of schools with transformational dollars, that fund might include those transformational outcomes of, helping those schools get started, making sure that they've had leadership training, making sure that they've had, teaching and learning support, making sure they have the technology to do their work, so that in the period of time that funding is given and incubated, you could expect those schools to hit certain targets, certain transformational outcomes. You also could think of outcomes like how New Schools Venture Fund thinks about it, like seed funding for an ed tech company or seed funding for an organization to scale their impact. Impacts in education, of course, cut across performance, they cut across resources, they look to scale. But the first thing you're going to need to do with that 5-year transformational fund is set some really clear outcomes and milestones as you're building that culture of innovation. Now, the second part of OMS is measures. So when you think about having those clear goals, you want to work with a light team. You want to work quarterly and monthly to make sure you're making iterative progress against those goals. So developing a budget, developing a staffing model, making sure that you've got program officers or program support to make sure those fundees or grantees have a way to scale to impact. So for instance, in those measures, you might say that we're going to accept a cohort of people we're going to back. You might say that we're going to have some initial convenings and determine criteria and what success looks like along with our macro outcomes and outcomes in their context. So this fund could be a launch pad, or this grant could be a launch pad, right? To make sure that a certain number of people scale their initiatives or move from the application phase, for example, in New Schools Ventures model, to actually being a fungible entity like a school or being an early company that's supported with additional funding. So those measures, those iterative measures, monthly, quarterly, matter. Now, the last piece would be supports. What kind of revenue is required for infrastructure? How are you going to support it with your team? This might include convenings, it might include coaching calls, it might include pairing them with experts. When I think about some of those models in our space, like a City Bridge, they do a lot around here's our fund to launch X school models. In launching that, we're going to have 4 quarterly convenings a year. We're going to have a network of virtual supports. We're going to be able to dispatch coaching, mentorship to bring these outcomes to fruition. So if you think about somebody like City Bridge, they want to make sure that the 10 schools in their portfolio are healthy, thriving, that they're financially secure, that they've got a model that's growing either with an attendance or enrollment, or they've got early outcomes on academic success. So when I thought about your question, outcomes, measures, and supports is how I would answer it. That immediately on the outcome side, you'd be crowdsourcing that to look at other transformational funds. You'd be establishing some peer support networks, and you'd be looking at some measures that other people have set in terms of transformational funding outcomes. That's how I would take it apart. Sorry we can't connect tomorrow, but hopefully this 4 minutes and 30 seconds is helpful. Good luck.